My name is Elias Varn, once a hab worker in Hive Primus on Varkos III, now a number. Prisoner 4729, etched into the iron collar around my neck. I was born under the shadow of the Hive spires, where the Emperor's light barely reaches. I toiled in the manufactorums, forging bolter shells for his armies. I was loyal. I was faithful. But in the Imperium, loyalty is no shield against justice. One mistake, one moment of weakness, and I was cast into the abyss of its prisons. This is my story, not of glory, but of survival in a galaxy that knows only punishment. This is what prison life is really like in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. The Imperium's laws are as unyielding as adamantium. They say the Emperor sees all, but it's the arbitrators who judge. My crime was small, or so I thought. A missed shift in the manufactorum, a day spent scavenging food for my starving family after a hivequake collapsed our hab block. I was no heretic, no traitor, but to the Adeptus Arbites, absence from duty is rebellion. The trial was swift. 10 minutes in a ceramite-plated chamber, my voice drowned by the hum of servo skulls recording my fate.
Guilty, the judge declared, his face hidden behind a black helm. The sentence? Life in the penal mines of subterranean Varkos. Death would have been kinder. In the Imperium, justice is a blade. Steal a loaf of corpse starch, and you'll lose a hand. Question the Emperor's divinity, and you'll lose your head. Fail to meet a quota, and you're condemned to the mines, the gallows, or worse, the servitor vats. I saw a man executed for sneezing on a shrine to the Emperor, his spittle deemed blasphemy. Another was sentenced to a lifetime breaking rocks for misquoting a hymn. The Imperium does not forgive, it punishes. And for men like me, the punishment is a slow death in the dark. They dragged me to subterranean Varkos in chains, packed into a transport hold with 100 others. The air was thick with sweat and despair. When the gates of Penal Complex Sigma opened, I saw my new home, a labyrinth of black iron and stone carved into the planet's crust.
The cells were coffins, cramped, windowless, barely wide enough to lie down. The walls wept with moisture, slick with mold that glowed faintly in the dark. The floor was a mire of filth, human waste, blood, and the leavings of those who died before us. A single lumen flickered above, its light too weak to banish the shadows. We slept on slabs of rock, if you could call it sleep. The cold seeped into my bones, and the stench choked my lungs. Rats, bloated from feeding on corpses, scurried over us at night. I learned to guard my scraps of food, a gray paste they called Nutrislurry, lest the rats or other prisoners steal it. The cells were never silent. Moans, screams, and the clanging of chains echoed day and night. I once shared a cell with a man who whispered prayers to the Emperor until his voice gave out. He died clutching a scrap of parchment with a hymn scrawled in blood. No one came to claim his body. They left it to rot until the guards dragged it away.
I tasted of ash and despair. It was never enough. My ribs pressed against my skin within weeks, my strength fading with every shift in the mines. Starvation killed the weak first. Hunger was my constant companion. The Nutrislurry came once a day, a handful of sludge, children, the elderly, those too broken to fight for their share. I saw a woman trade her last crust for a sip of water, only to collapse hours later, her body too frail to continue. Disease was worse. The air was thick with spores, the water tainted with toxins from the mines. Coughs turned to fevers, fevers to sores that wept black pus. I caught a lung rot in my second month, each breath a knife in my chest. The Medicae bays were a cruel joke. rusted tools, no medicine, and churjons who cared only for quotas, not lives. I survived by chance, my body too stubborn to die.
Others weren't so lucky. I watched a boy, no older than 10, waste away, his eyes pleading for relief that never came. The guards burned his body in the incinerator pits, his name forgotten. The penal colonies of the Imperium are not prisons, they are graves. Subterrane Varkos was a network of tunnels where we mined adamantium ore for the Emperor's war machine. 12-hour shifts, no rest, no mercy. The air was thick with dust that coated our lungs, the heat from molten seams blistering our skin. We swung picks until our hands bled, the iron handles slick with sweat and blood. Overseers with electro-whips patrolled the tunnels, their lashes falling on anyone who slowed. I still bear the scars, jagged lines across my back where the whip bit deep. The work was endless. Ore carts rumbled day and night, their weight crushing men too weak to move. Cave-ins were common, burying dozens in a single collapse. No one mourned.
Electrodes burned my flesh. Needles pierced my veins, and the interrogator's voice demanded confessions of heresy I hadn't committed. "The Emperor sees your sins," he'd say, his augmetic eye glowing red. I screamed, I wept, I begged, but I never broke. Others did, confessing to crimes they didn't commit just to end the pain. Most never returned. Those who did were hollow, their spirits shattered. The guards were as corrupt as the prisoners they despised. They wore the Emperor's Aquila, but their hearts were black. They sold food, water, even moments of rest for favors, or trinkets, or worse. I saw a woman trade her body for a cup of clean water, her eyes dead as she returned to her cell. The guards ran black markets, trading stolen ore for luxuries from the upper hives. One guard, a brute named Kor, would pit prisoners against each other in blood fights, betting on the outcome.
I fought once, my fists breaking a man's jaw to survive. Kor laughed, tossing me a scrap of bread as reward. Some guards were worse than cruel. They were sadists. They'd withhold food for days, then watch as prisoners fought over a single crust. They'd lock men in airless chambers, laughing as they clawed at the walls. The Arbite's overseers turned a blind eye, caring only for the ore quotas. In the Imperium, corruption is not a flaw, it's a system. In the mines, strength was survival. The prisoners formed gangs, led by the strongest, the most ruthless. The Iron Claws ruled subterrane Varkos, a band of former hive gangers with scars and crude tattoos. Their leader, a giant named Brack, had killed a guard with his bare hands and lived to boast of it. The Claws hoarded food, water, tools, anything that gave power. They offered protection for a price, your labor, your dignity, or your life.
I joined no gang. I was too stubborn, too proud. But I paid for it. The Claws beat me bloody when I refused to give them my slurry ration. I fought back, breaking a man's arm, and earned a week in solitary, a pitch-black cell where I could hear my own heartbeat. When I returned, Brock offered me a place in the Claws. I spat in his face. It cost me a tooth, but I kept my soul. The Imperium demands faith, even in its prisons. Every dawn, a voxcaster blared hymns to the Emperor, their words pounding into our skulls. Confessors in black robes patrolled the mines, preaching his divinity. Refusal to pray was heresy, and heresy meant death. I saw a man burned alive for muttering a curse during a sermon, his screams drowned by the confessor's chants. Another was flogged until his back was raw for failing to kneel properly.
They forced us to memorize the Imperial Creed, to chant it until our throats bled. I believed in the Emperor, I still do, but the confessors twisted his teachings into a whip. They said our suffering was his will, our punishment a path to redemption. I wanted to believe them, but when I saw a child whipped for forgetting a verse, I wondered if the Emperor's light could ever reach a place like this. Escape was a dream whispered in the dark, a hope that kept men alive and drove them to madness. The mines were a fortress, adamantium gates, auto-turret grids, and Arbites patrols. Some tried anyway. I saw a group of 5 tunnel through a waste chute, their plan desperate but clever. They were caught within hours, their bodies strung up at the complex gates riddled with lass burns. The guards left them there for weeks, a warning to us all.
I dreamed of escape once. I mapped the tunnels in my mind, counting guards, memorizing patrols, but I knew the truth. There was nowhere to go. Varkos III was a hive world, its surface a wasteland of ash and acid rain. Even if I reached the upper hives, I was a branded convict. My collar marked me for death. Escape was impossible. Hope was a lie. Most prisoners die in the mines. Starvation, disease, cave-ins, or the guards' whims, death comes in 1,000 forms. I saw men crushed by falling rock, their screams cut short. Others faded slowly, their bodies too weak to swing a pick. The lucky ones died quickly. The unlucky were chosen for the servitor vats. The Adeptus Mechanicus came every month, their red robes stark against the black stone. They selected prisoners, those too broken to work but not yet dead.
I watched them take a man named Torin, his legs shattered from a cave-in. He begged as they dragged him to the conversion chambers. When he returned, he was no longer human, a lobotomized husk of flesh and metal, his eyes replaced with augmetics, his voice a monotone drone. Servitors are the Imperium's final punishment, a fate worse than death. I prayed every night that I would die before they chose me. I survived 3 years in subterranean Varkos, 3 years of hunger, pain, and fear. I should have broken, like so many others, but something kept me alive, a spark of defiance, or perhaps the Emperor's grace. One day, as I toiled in the mines, a shadow fell over me. Not a guard, not a confessor, but a giant in green ceramite, his eyes glowing red like embers. A salamander, a space marine.
His name was Brother Sergeant Torak of the Salamander's 5th Company. He had come to Varkos III to quell a rebellion in the upper hives, but he heard of the mines, heard of the suffering. Unlike the arbitrators, unlike the confessors, he saw us as human. He knelt beside me, his massive form dwarfing mine, and asked my name. I told him, my voice a rasp. He nodded, as if it mattered. "We are salamanders," he said. "We protect the Emperor's people, even those the Imperium has forgotten." He gave me a canteen of clean water, a treasure beyond imagining. He spoke to the overseers, demanding better rations, Medicae care. They obeyed, not out of compassion, but fear of his wrath. For the first time in years, I felt hope.
Torak could not free me. The Imperium's laws bound even him. But he left me something greater. A reminder that humanity endures, even in the darkest places. I still wear the collar of prisoner 4729, but I carry his words in my heart. I am not just a number. I am Elias Varn, a man, a servant of the Emperor, and I will endure. This is prison life in the Warhammer 40,000 universe.
It is not justice, it is punishment, relentless and cruel. It is cells of filth, mines of death, and guards who revel in power. It is hunger that gnaws, disease that festers, and fear that breaks the soul. It is gangs that rule, and confessors who demand faith at the end of a lash. It is a system that grinds men to dust, sparing none, redeeming none. Yet even here, in the depths of despair, there is a flicker of hope.